Above a pretty pub in Nottingham, 20-year-old Matthew Pike and his 21-year-old girlfriend Joanna created their first home together.
It was obvious that they really loved each other deeply, and she was so good for him.
As well as studying at Nottingham Trent University, the couple ran a website forum for fans of a computer war game.
The people got to know each other very, very well on there, although they probably never physically met each other.
But Matthew and Joanna had no idea that the website forum would open their lives to an evil stranger.
I didn't know any of the problems they were having. I wish Matthew could have, sort of confided in me and said, look, I'm having a problem.
A stranger who would tear their lives apart.
This developed into one of the most extreme cases of stalking I've ever witnessed.
Because what began as stalking was to end in a gruesome murder. Stowmarket, a small, picturesque town in Suffolk. This is where Kim and William Pike decided to settle down and raise their two sons, Matthew and Adam.
Matthew was an easy child. He sort of laid back and happy, always smiling.
Matthew Pike was born on the 23rd of August 1988 and was the baby of the Pike family.
Matthew was quite shy and reserved, but he had a really wicked sense of humour. You didn't have to amuse him, he'd amuse himself, and he'd spend loads of time on the computer.
Matthew's passion for computers and playing computer games began at an early age.
We've always had some kind of computer or games console in this house. I was looking at a family video the other day, and Matthew was about 4 or 5, and he was playing on my mum and dad's really old computer, even at that age.
Matthew is very talented with computers, without a shadow of a doubt. He invented his own little programs, his own little games here and there, stuff he'd put on the internet.
By the time he was in his late teens, there was one game in particular Matthew loved to play, a war game based in a fantasy world where players used cunning and tactical strategies to defeat an enemy army.
Advanced Wars really was, from what Matthew had told us, was sort of like a more technical game of chess, basically. You'd have your army and you'd set out your pieces, just like a chess game, really. And you'd sort of battle other people from around the world on the internet and sort of build up your army as you went along, really.
Matthew shared tips about playing his favourite game with other players on the internet, including a 17-year-old girl called Joanna from Selby in Yorkshire. The pair hit it off.
I think he was a bit embarrassed that he'd met her online and wanted to meet her face to face. So when he went up to York to meet her, he didn't actually tell us that that was what he was doing. He told us that he was meeting a friend, and we assumed it was male, and that they were going to a concert in York.
Romance blossomed, and it was soon time for the couple to meet each other's parents.
I thought she was lovely. She's stunning to look at, and she was into computing, which was, as far as Matthew was concerned, a bonus. We hadn't been prepared for the fact that they would become a couple so quickly and be so happy together, but it was obvious that they really loved each other deeply, and she was so good for him.
Joanna did wonders for Matthew's confidence, and when university beckoned, they decided to head to the same city so they could be together. Matthew and Joanna chose Nottingham Trent University. After a year, the couple moved in together and continued to share their passion for computers. With an online friend called James, they set up a website forum called Wars Central, where fans of their favourite tactical war game could share tips.
There were a hardcore of individuals, probably 50 or so, that were regularly on the site.
The website forum became central to the lives of this group of young computer gamers, and their online chats were not limited to advanced wars.
Some of these people were online all day, every day. They lived their lives through it. It seemed they talked about everything from relationships to families, holidays, politics, their studies. Nothing appeared to be off limits.
The forum members felt they knew one another, but the reality was they were putting their trust in strangers, most of whom they knew nothing about and had never met in person.
People need to think, when you make friends online, just who you are inviting into your life.
The website members had usernames to give them some level of anonymity. Matthew was called Shade and Joanna went by Jojo. But as a young woman who was passionately interested in tactical war games, Joanna stood out in the forum.
It appeared to be quite a male world, but Joanna was definitely the matriarch. She was up there. She was the leading lady.
And Joanna quickly attracted the attention of a forum member whose username was Eagle the Lightning.
Matthew, Joanna and most of the forum members knew very, very little about Eagle the Lightning. They knew he was German and his first name was David. They didn't know any more than that.
David told Joanna that his parents had both abandoned him when he was just 10 years old and that he now lived with his elderly grandmother.
Joanna herself was particularly compassionate towards him and entered into sort of private conversations with him to try and bolster his confidence.
But Eagle the Lightning quickly wanted much more than Joanna's friendship and compassion.
David truly believed that one day Joanna would be his girlfriend and they'd end up together.
Eagle the Lightning knew Joanna was Matthew's girlfriend, but that did not deter him. And the more he found out about Joanna on the internet, the more obsessed he became.
He said that he liked her, and he'd liked her for a long time, but that when he saw her picture on Facebook, he decided that he was in love with her.
David had a real thing for redheads. He considered them to be superior, more intelligent, and Joanna was David's perfect woman.
David told Joanna about his growing feelings for her, and she immediately tried to end his infatuation.
She told him that she was deeply in love with Matthew and she had no interest in anybody else.
But David refused to take no for an answer. He loved Joanna and he was determined she would love him back. Without warning, on the 3rd of May 2008, a document appeared on the forum from Eagle the Lightning. He had posted a love letter to Joanna for all the members to see.
It was 2 pages of A4 declaring that she was the first thing he thought of when he woke up in the morning and the last thing he thought of when he went to sleep at night, and how she'd changed his world.
The declaration also said David loved Joanna more than anything else in his life, even though he'd never met her in person. Eagle the Lightning had become completely obsessed with Joanna, and there was nothing she could say or do to stop him. In May 2008, students 20-year-old Matthew Pike and 21-year-old Joanna were living together in Nottingham. Both had part-time jobs.
They liked quiet things. They weren't a pair for going out to the pub and getting drunk or anything like that. They would go for walks. They were just happy in each other's company.
From their flat, they had set up and ran a website forum called Wars Central, but one of its members, 21-year-old David, known online as Eagle the Lightning, had become completely infatuated with Joanna.
He would ask things such as, "Where is Matt? Is Matt with you?" And it was those sort of things that she found not appropriate. So she would very quickly try to cut that off. This isn't the time for us to talk about anything to do with you and me. There is no you and me. Just focus on what we are here to do, which is talk about the games.
The young couple had no idea Eagle the Lightning was painstakingly finding out information about where they lived.
What he did was ask various people about Joe and Matt. So, for example, whereabouts in Nottingham do they live? What sort of street is it? So, over a period of time, he began to pen a picture of where it was that they lived.
He knew it was above a pub. He also knew there was a park nearby, and he was a user of Google Earth. It wouldn't have been difficult for him to locate that flat. But I think the final clincher was when he led to one of the other users to believe that he knew so much about the location of a flat that the other user actually confirmed the address.
Through his detailed research on the internet, Eagle the Lightning also knew the couple had gone on holiday to Devon with Joanna's parents. He decided to plan a surprise for them on their return home to Nottingham.
They received text messages while they were away that suggested David was going to be coming to Nottingham. And James actually gives them what he refers to as a heads up that Eagle the Lightning was intending to travel.
Hey Joe, ETL is coming to...
But Matthew and Joanna thought it was a joke. Surely a stranger wouldn't travel hundreds of miles to another country uninvited just because he had a bizarre crush. Especially a stranger who had no idea where they lived. On the 21st of June 2008, the young couple arrived back home in Nottingham.
They're approached by an individual. They didn't know him, and this individual says to them, "Hello, I'm Eagle the Lightning from Germany."
The forum user turned stalker had arrived unannounced and uninvited outside the couple's home.
When Matthew and Joanna first met David, they were very polite towards him. They felt a little bit embarrassed about the situation, but they were typically British about it and offered him some hospitality to make him not feel so unwanted.
Matthew and Joanna found out Eagle the Lightning's name was David Heiss, that he spoke perfect English and that he didn't intend to fly home to Germany for a month.
She was upset about it, but Matthew felt sorry for Heiss. It was him that suggested that, you know, he's come all this way, let's be friendly towards him, and convinced Joe that Heiss should be invited into their flat.
But it appeared David Heiss expected more than hospitality. The virtual stranger expected to stay with them. But Joanna was determined to get him out of their flat as soon as she could.
Have you got any rooms to offer tonight, please?
Joanna called 20 hotels and hostels.
Oh, really? Not at all.
But there were no rooms available in Nottingham for that night.
Right, okay, thanks anyway.
The uninvited visitor had to stay with them or sleep on the streets.
There was a conversation that her and Matt had about where they could send Heiss, and it was Matt that suggested that for one night only, they allow Heiss to stay.
But the size of the couple's studio flat meant their unwelcome guest had to sleep right next to their bed. Joanna was deeply uncomfortable with the situation.
She barely slept that night. She recalls waking up and looking, and Heiss was awake and staring at her. So that spooked her as well.
David Heiss watched her all night long. Joanna ensured David did not stay a second night. She found him a hotel room.
Hi, is it possible to book a room, please, for tonight? Oh, you have?
The couple were determined to do whatever they could to stop David Heiss staying in Nottingham for a whole month.
Already at that point, they were sending messages to other gamers about Heiss and the fact that they thought he was somewhat unusual and that they were trying to work out what to do with him.
Well, we've just been away, we've just gone back.
Heiss's intentions during his time in Nottingham were clearly to spend as much time with Joanna as he could, even to the point that he would ask Joanna in front of Matt if there was any chance of him spending any time with her, with Matt not being present.
David could see his behaviour was unnerving Joanna and tried to justify his actions.
During the time that Heiss stayed in Nottingham, he wrote letters to try and convince Joanna that he wasn't weird and to try and justify the reasons for his behaviour and to tell her about the fact that he'd been discarded by his parents.
Joanna became more and more uncomfortable, but after a week they were able to send David Heiss on his way without offending him.
Between them and the gamers, they came up with a plan to keep Heiss away from them. They suggested that he travel around the country to go and visit some of the other gamers.
David Heiss had finally left Nottingham, and Matthew and Joanna were able to put the strange incident with the German forum member behind them. No one outside the forum, not even Matthew's nearest and dearest, had any knowledge of the bizarre encounter.
He seemed happy. There was no inkling that anything was wrong or upsetting him. He just seemed a normal Matthew. He would be difficult to get information out of on the phone. We would have to question him. Just the normal mum things. Are you all right? Are you eating? You know, Are you looking after yourself? Are you washing clothes? That kind of thing.
Matthew believed he had looked after himself and Joanna by moving their uninvited visitor on, but little did they know that after meeting Joanna, David Heiss had become even more obsessed.
The thoughts that dominated his mind at that time were all about Joanna and him being with her.
The more forum members who met David Heiss in person, the more his behaviour became a topic of conversation.
People having met him now think there's something really quite not right. They all found him a bit unusual. None of them liked the idea that he clearly was becoming besotted by Joanne.
Nothing anybody would say to David would have got him to change his mind about his feelings towards Joanna.
And David Heiss quickly learned that his fascination with Joanna and eagerness to discuss her online was a hot topic on the forum. He was being described as strange.
David didn't really like people discussing him over the internet, and this made him angry.
Heiss is already beginning to develop the feeling that they are ostracising him from the group.
But Eagle the Lightning wasn't the only forum member who was becoming angry about the situation. Matthew was becoming increasingly frustrated about David's obsession with his girlfriend.
On the 22nd of July, Matthew generates a document. It's a document referred to as the 19 Reasons. And the 19 Reasons is a list of things that he puts together that indicates why he hates Eagle the Lightning.
I hate the way you meddle, the way you never let something rest. I hate you because you tracked us down and intruded on our lives. I hate you because no matter how many times we invited you in, you barely said a damn word. I hate the way you endlessly plug Joe, when I can see how annoyed she gets. I hate you forever laying eyes on the woman I have dedicated my life to.
The 19 Reasons reveals in no uncertain terms exactly how Matthew felt about David Heiss, his infatuation with his girlfriend Joanna, and his unwelcome visit to the UK. Eagle the Lightning had blatantly laid his cards on the table in terms of his feelings for Joanna, and in return, Matthew Pike followed suit. But he only emailed his attack on Heiss to a few friends on the forum, not to everyone.
It took a lot to upset Matthew or to get him angry. He'll take so much and stay calm, and then he would explode, but it was very, very rare. He hated confrontation, he hated arguing.
But David Heiss soon learnt of the 19 Reasons document and was furious.
His reaction to that is clearly very, very angry.
And he could not understand why the website forum was siding with Matthew.
Most of the forum members believed David's behaviour towards Joanna was unacceptable. However, David believed he was right and his behaviour was proper.
He would start to prolifically defend his corner, and he would then become increasingly aggressive. He wouldn't leave a conversation, just leave and walk away. He was like a dog with a rag. He wouldn't let go. People had to block him in order to get rid of him.
Even after the forum members blocked him, he still thought he was doing nothing wrong.
David's behaviour resulted in him being banned from the website forum, and because his whole life was online, the repercussions were devastating.
To be blocked out of a conversation where everybody else was involved would lead to enormous paranoia. Horrendous. It's like all your friends refusing to answer the phone to you. It could be seen regularly, individuals saying, please, please let me back in, begging to come online, and all the rest of the users chuckling and refusing to let them back in. It was really quite something quite damaging.
And David Heiss believed there was just one person to blame for his exclusion from the website forum.
Heiss thought that it was now Matthew that was generating the problem between them, and clearly he was trying to reflect that with other gamers. The response from them was, you know, just forget it, you know, just leave it all alone. But we also know that he began to indicate that was something that was making him so angry that he'd got to come back to confront Matthew about it.
On the 31st of July 2008, less than 2 weeks after his first trip to the UK, David Heiss borrowed his uncle's car and began the long drive from Germany to Nottingham, determined to settle the score with Matthew and prove to Joanna that she should be with him.
At this point, David was totally obsessed with Joanna and was stalking her.
Without taking any breaks to rest, Heiss drove relentlessly for hour after hour.
He is intent on travelling all the way to Nottingham, that's evident. About 2:30 in the morning, Heiss's car leaves the road at high speed and goes into a ditch.
David Heiss's absolute obsession had delivered him to the brink of destruction. In the early hours of the 1st of August 2008, David Heiss had lost control of his car during a non-stop journey from Germany to Nottingham and crashed. It was a miracle he survived.
As the car that David was driving was a left-hand drive, when it left the road, had it been a right-hand drive, his injuries would have been a lot more serious, perhaps fatal.
Heiss was rescued by the British Emergency Services and was open with them about the reason for his mammoth journey.
The police officers we spoke to that attended the scene told us of a man who was there alone in his car, having come to UK to visit his girlfriend in Nottingham. They hadn't been going out very long. However, he did speak to her quite a lot over the internet.
Heiss was telling the police about Joanna, who did live in Nottingham but was not his girlfriend. He had developed an online infatuation with her that within a matter of weeks had become altogether more sinister, and even a near-death experience would not deter him.
David was obsessed with Joanna and he was stalking her. And there's no other word to describe it other than he stalked her.
Joanna was scared, but took comfort from the fact that she believed Heiss was at home in Germany. But he wasn't.
Jo arrived home from work, and as she approaches her address, she sees Heiss waiting for her.
Heiss's intense fixation with Joanna had begun to seriously trouble the couple, but they never revealed their concerns to anyone outside the forum, not even to their families.
Matthew kept most things quite close to himself. If he had a problem, he didn't like to burden other people with it. So we were always quite late in finding out if there was a problem.
Matthew and Joanna believed they could cope with the situation.
Living away from home for the first time, they thought that they were now adults and they could sort of deal with things on their own. You know, if he'd have come to me and said, I'm having a problem, you know, I would have been there in a heartbeat.
Matthew and Joanna desperately began to think of a way to get Heiss to leave Nottingham again, but it became increasingly clear he would not go back to Germany until he saw the object of his obsession.
She knows that Heiss is only here to see her and is just pursuing her. This has slowly but surely dawned on her that he's become completely obsessed by her, and that obviously scares her a lot.
David wanted Joanna, and he thought that Joanna would come round to his way of thinking eventually.
As a last resort, Joanna and Matthew agreed to meet David Heiss at the Arboretum Park in Nottingham. They were determined to end Heiss's obsession with Joanna once and for all.
The conversation in the Arboretum is really quite dramatic between the group.
Joanna couldn't have been any clearer with a message to David.
Just stay out of my life! You're just ruining it!
Joanna told Heiss there was no chance she would ever be with him. She loved Matthew and he must stop harassing them. Hearing the rejection face-to-face from Joanna crushed David Heiss.
Heiss is so upset, is sobbing and can be barely understood by Joe.
The situation was clearly getting out of hand, and in a moment of calm, Joanna and David Heiss agreed, quite adultly, to have a ceasefire and not to contact each other for a set amount of time.
As Matthew and Joanna left the park that day, they believed that would be the last time they ever saw David Heiss and that their online troubles were over. Heiss returned to Germany on the 2nd of August 2008, but his fixation with Joanna continued.
David didn't want to move on and couldn't let himself move on.
Despite the promises he'd made in the park, once back in Germany, Heiss's obsession reached a new level of intensity. On the 16th of September 2008, he and Joanna talked online.
He makes reference to suicide and doing away with his life, which is no longer worthwhile if Joanna doesn't want to be in it. And he discusses the possibility of turning up in Nottingham and committing suicide in front of Joanna.
Distraught, Joanna permanently blocked David Heiss. But although he could not contact her online, he decided to find another way to get in touch.
Can I speak to Joe, please?
He telephoned her at home.
No, you can't. Can't you just leave us alone?
A blazing row ensued, after which Matthew and Joanna were both described as being hysterical, and certainly the chat log conversations, Joanna makes reference to Heiss needing to see a psychiatrist.
Matthew and Joanna told David Heiss if he ever returned to Nottingham, they would call the police. They also checked online to find out if Heiss's stalking was breaking the law. But on the evening of the 18th of September 2008, they put their worries aside because they'd been together for exactly 3 years.
Matt and Joe went out to celebrate their anniversary. But it's fair to say that at that time, they weren't feeling great because of everything that had been happening. So it was a very, very low-key evening, and they were back home in their flat by about 9:30.
The next day, Joanna got up to go to work, just like any other morning.
She went to go to work. The last thing she did was she woke Matthew up, she kissed him, she told him that she loved him, and then she left.
Bye. See you.
When Joanna went out to work that morning, she had no idea she was being watched.
Joanna and Matthew would usually exchange texts throughout the day.
Joanna had tried to contact Matthew repeatedly during that day, and as she had no replies, she started to get seriously concerned.
By the time she left work, Joanna was worried about Matthew.
She runs back home. Upon entering into the communal hallway, Jo sees what she thinks is a small smear of blood. Jo is now hyperventilating. She runs to the door of her own flat and been met by an horrendous scene.
It's absolutely the worst nightmare that you can ever imagine opening your front door onto.
The flat had been ransacked. There was property all over the floor, paperwork, clothing, footwear, and at that point, the only thought that she had was that somebody had been into her flat. There had been a burglary that had gone wrong.
Any persons walking into that crime scene would have been shocked and horrified by what they'd seen.
There was blood from the front door all the way down the passageway and all the way into the living area, was all over the bed, it was on the walls, it was absolutely everywhere.
But the horror which confronted Joanna when she first entered their flat was nothing compared to what she discovered next.
In there, she finds Matthew on the floor.
Frantic, distraught, Joanna dialed 999. But there was nothing anyone could do. Matthew had been dead for hours. It appeared he had lost his life when a robbery had gone horribly wrong.
When police officers arrived within the scene, they very, very quickly took Joanna away to the police station. She was taken into a room and they made every effort to try and comfort her and calm her down.
While Joanna was being looked after in Nottingham, down in Suffolk, a police car arrived at the Pike family home.
We'd just gone to bed, it was about 10:15, and there was a knock at the front door. There were 2 policemen standing there. Never had any inkling that it was to do with Matthew. And when they told us, just couldn't believe it.
When my dad first broke the news to me, I remember the exact time. It was 27 minutes past 11 at night.
They didn't have much information, just that he'd been found dead in the flat. So we had no idea what had happened, and we had to wait for about an hour before we heard from the police in Nottingham, who said that he'd been found with stab wounds, and that was all they could tell us at that time. And it was just the most awful, awful night. And, well, I would never want anybody else to go through something like that.
The Nottinghamshire forensics team began investigating Matthew and Joanna's flat. The scene immediately began to reveal what had happened to 20-year-old Matthew Pike on the 19th of September 2008.
I think we both assumed that it was a burglary gone wrong, because I couldn't see that anybody who knew Matthew would want to hurt him.
The attack on Matthew was sustained, ferocious, frenzied. No one will be able to understand what Matthew went through, but what I do know is that he fought frantically for his life.
He wasn't the sort of person to cause anybody to do that. And the questions we were being asked just seemed... I remember thinking, this is really peculiar. They're talking as though it's somebody who knew him.
At the crime scene, the forensics team had found a crucial clue which proved Matthew did indeed know his killer.
Very close to Matthew's head was an old computer monitor that had been on the floor, and there was writing on the side of the computer adjacent to Matthew's head. It was written in blood. It was a message that was written in Matthew's blood. And very quickly it became evident that Matthew had tried to send us a message about what had happened.
With one of his last actions, Matthew had tried to identify the name of his killer.
How brave he was to call over there and to write, you know, to try and give the police some kind of clue as to what was happening. I mean, I wouldn't have thought to have done that if I was in his shoes. He was just so brave, and, you know, if it's possible, I'd love him even more for it.
But would the 2 letters written in blood be enough to ensure detectives caught Matthew's killer? On the 19th of September 2008, 21-year-old Joanna discovered the body of her 20-year-old boyfriend at the flat they shared in Nottingham. At first, everyone assumed he'd been killed during a burglary, but before he died, Matthew Pike left detectives a vital clue.
His last efforts were to try and write the name David on the side of his computer. He never completed that. He wrote a D, he wrote an A, and then Sadly, he's passed away and he's not been able to write anymore, but clearly that's what he was trying to write.
And when asked by the police if she knew anyone who might wish Matthew harm, Joanna immediately gave them a name that corresponded with Matthew's dying action.
David, maybe.
It was very evident from those early conversations, having spoken with Joanne, that the only individual that would have wanted to take Matthew's life was David Heiss.
Saying that he loved me and
Joanna revealed the months of problems they had endured as a result of David Heiss becoming relentlessly obsessed with her. But all she knew about Heiss, apart from his name and username, was that he lived somewhere in Germany. Nottinghamshire detectives had to urgently solve the mystery. They turned to Matthew and Joanna's website. They asked all the other website forum users to keep behaving online as if nothing had happened, so they didn't make Heiss nervous. Meanwhile, one of the detectives quickly became a member of the forum.
I could observe what was being said and who was online, who was talking and what they were talking about. And if there was any information that was going to be important to the inquiry, how to feed that into the inquiry as quickly as possible.
And he discovered David Heiss was online, talking about Matthew with other forum members.
David Heiss actually introduced in a conversation with another user that, "You don't think I did it, do you? I can prove that I was at home on Friday." And the other user says to him, "Prove it." And he says, "What?" and sends a copy of a travel ticket for the Friday morning to prove that he was actually in Germany.
David Heiss seemed confident he could prove his innocence. It also appeared he had been online, using the forum the day of Matthew's murder. David Heiss had alibis. But they were alibis the Nottinghamshire detectives were prepared to test. They started with the airports to see whether Heiss had entered the UK around the time of Matthew's murder.
We knew that Heiss had travelled before, and sure enough, we found him on a passenger mandate from flights in and out of Frankfurt into Birmingham. As a result of that, I was dispatched down to Birmingham Airport to try and locate Heiss on the CCTV footage from within the airport.
The CCTV footage from Birmingham Airport clearly showed David Heiss boarding a plane to Frankfurt 4 hours after Matthew's murder on the 19th of September 2008. His alibis were lies. Heiss had secretly travelled to the UK.
That was a eureka moment. It's the first time we had a physical description of what Heiss was wearing, and also it gave me an idea of who to look for on the inbound footage. We could then use that information to properly analyse the Nottingham CCTV, and hopefully we'd find him at our scene.
Detectives were able to find CCTV footage revealing Heiss's journey from the airport all the way to Matthew and Joanna's address the night before the attack. They were also able to track his return journey the morning of the brutal murder. David Heiss was at the murder scene, but he remained a complete mystery. All the detectives knew was that he lived somewhere in Germany. The race was on to arrest him. Detectives turned to the members of the website forum asking for any information about the elusive Heiss, known as Eagle the Lightning.
But it told us about the accident on the 1st of August on the M11 in Cambridge.
And we were aware that after the crash, that a person had been taken to the hospital. We managed to ascertain some details and an address in Germany for our main suspect.
Less than 5 days after the murder, Nottinghamshire police had tracked David Heiss down. On the 24th of September 2008, he was arrested at home by the German police. Detectives called the Pike family to tell them the news.
We had a phone call to say that they'd got a suspect, but that was the first time I heard his name. Didn't know anything about him up until then.
David Heiss was in custody, and the Nottinghamshire detective team travelled to Germany to question him. And when Heiss was interviewed, he confessed.
Heiss admitted that he'd been to Nottingham and they'd stabbed Matthew Pike.
But he claimed he only did so in self-defence. David Heiss was confessing to manslaughter, not premeditated murder.
He didn't actually want to admit a murder because that first account only indicated that he had gone there to hurt Matthew and to punch him, and that a fight had ensued, and that the knife he had with him he used to defend himself, and that he had stabbed Matthew in order to protect himself from what Matthew was going to do to him.
Detectives needed concrete evidence to charge and convict Heiss of premeditated murder. They searched his house and recovered the blood-soaked jacket he had worn when he killed Matthew. And in the pocket was a critical clue which proved Heiss had carefully planned Matthew's murder. It was a suicide note, supposedly written by Matthew, but in fact detectives were able to prove it had been created on Heiss's computer in Germany 2 days before the murder. David Heiss had clearly planned Matthew's murder and intended to make it look like suicide.
On the 17th of September, we know that he generated a suicide note that was written on behalf of Matthew, intending to leave it in the flat as if Matthew had taken his own life.
But Heiss's psychotic hatred of Matthew meant the fake suicide plan was destined to fail.
The attack had been so brutal that there was no way that anybody would consider that Matthew had taken his own life.
It was very evident that Matthew Pike fought for his life, struggled incessantly inside the flat, and Heiss had a clear realisation that anybody that would have walked in there would have known that that wasn't somebody that took his own life. So he then decided to make it look like a burglary. He travelled to the UK with one thing on his mind, and that was to kill Matthew Pike.
David Heiss was extradited to the UK to await trial. While the case was being prepared for court, the Pike family had to deal with their grief at losing Matthew.
Christmas was horrible. We didn't really want to celebrate it. We didn't want to do anything, but we've got grandchildren and we've still got Adam to consider. So we did the best we could and we got through it. It's one in a long line of first occasions that we had to go through, and you just do it because you have to.
On the 27th of April 2009, David Heiss stood trial for the murder of Matthew Pike.
I knew it was going to be upsetting, but I hadn't realised that I would be so upset right from the first day as I was. That was where the pathologist was talking about and what Matthew would have been doing at particular times, and it was when he said that Matthew was in the fetal position, and that upset me.
During the trial, the detective team presented their case to the jury. David Heiss had booked his plane tickets from Frankfurt to Birmingham over a week before flying and had asked his sister in Germany to log on to the website for him in his name whilst he was out of the country, to create an alibi. Heiss travelled to Nottingham on the 18th of September 2008 and waited outside Matthew and Joanna's flat overnight. He watched Joanna go to work at 7:30 a.m. on the morning of the 19th of September. Half an hour later, he went to the couple's apartment and knocked on the door. When Matthew opened the door, Heiss immediately began his attack, viciously stabbing Matthew for the first time at the doorway to his flat. He then stabbed him a further 85 times. Heiss had arrived with the fake suicide note ready in his pocket, but realised the murder was so violent, so brutal, that no one would believe Matthew had killed himself. Heiss decided instead to make it appear the flat had been burgled. As Matthew lay dying, he created a vital clue for detectives by writing the letters D and A in his own blood. Meanwhile, Heiss washed himself, changed into the spare clothes he had brought with him, and left the apartment, carrying his blooded clothes back to Germany. He had been in the UK just 16 hours. On the 11th of May 2009, the jury found David Heiss guilty of the murder of Matthew Pike at Nottingham Crown Court. He was sentenced to life imprisonment.
I was overjoyed that he was found guilty and, you know, he's been put away, but no sentence to ever bring Matthew back.
I was relieved, but then I started to feel sorry for him because this was going to wreck his life as well. And I know that sounds ridiculous because he'd murdered my son, but I think it's part of being a mother.
The tragic 21st century crime that robbed Joanna of her loving boyfriend and Matthew's family of their beloved son, brother and uncle could clearly happen to anyone, anywhere.
People gain a great deal of confidence when they're on the computer within their own homes. They dish out information and form friendships with people that they don't actually really know. It's a very, very dangerous practice, and people should think very long and hard before they disclose their personal information on the computer.
Following the trial, Joanna has begun trying to rebuild her life.
We're still in touch with Joanna. She's actually become godmother to one of Adam's children, and she's going to go back to university soon. She's trying to rebuild her life. She'll never forget Matthew, but she's got to carry on.
Matthew Pike will never be forgotten. After his death, the website he created with Joanna was flooded with tributes to Matthew, celebrating his life and talent.
I knew nothing about the website that he was involved in until after he died, and people told me then, and I wish he had, because I was so proud and so impressed.